Contracted pneumonia, so wasn't able to join us. But we have a local Mississippi native, Mr. Edmund Barrett, who arrived in Hawaii in the spring of '41 and was at Pearl Harbor during the attack. So I was actually a farmer here for many years, went to school at 9 degrees, multiple degrees. And we're going to let him do a little self-introduction, tell you kind of some of his memories of his experience, and then we'll take some questions, okay? I'll turn this on so folks can hear me. Okay, it's on. So you can just tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, that's close enough right there.
Oh, yes. We can hear you.
Yeah, it's right here. It's the microphone.
Okay.
Okay.
First place, I'm 90 years old. And the first peacetime draft law in our national history was passed in October 1940. The war in Europe had started in '34 with Adolf Hitler. And our president, Franklin Roosevelt, had he not passed that draft, a lot of people were against it. Peacetime draft. If he hadn't passed that draft, we'd have been flat-footed naked when the war started. Because we would not been prepared. And it was, we did have a bunch of men that had basic training. And he had enlarged the Navy. We had a great Navy. But anyway, if he hadn't done that, we would really been in a bad way to go, bad shape. But my father had served as a volunteer in the Navy in World War I. And he got married, enlisted in the Navy, and left for duty the next day. He had learned to make bread. He was the oldest child in his family. And his mother had rheumatoid arthritis. And she had taught him to make bread. And when he went in the Navy, and we got in World War I, and just slammed back real quick, unprepared. And he went to Hampton Roads, Virginia. And they asked, anybody ever make bread? They're speaking of what we call loaf bread. He held up his hand, and he's the only one that ever made loaf bread. And they put him in the bake shop. That's what they call it, where they made bread. And he never left that. He had 11 months there. He told me many times he thought every month he'd go aboard ship. He stayed 11 months in the Navy and never aboard a ship. Anyway, when he had been dating my mother about a year, they had the same pastor, but they lived about 45 miles apart. The pastor was from Aberdeen, and that's where my mother went to church. But anyway, when the congregation in Tupelo became bigger than Aberdeen, they moved the pastor to Tupelo. And that's where it is today. I'm from South Tupelo, and we are under the jurisdiction of the pastor in Tupelo. I'm Catholic, and that's where our pastor lives in Tupelo. We have a big new church.
What about you want to start on Pearl Harbor?
Yeah. Now, passed that first peacetime draft law, and my father had volunteered in World War I, and all my family had the volunteer spirit. There were 3 of us brothers, and a sister volunteered for World War II. No draftees. But I looked around, and I said, well, the enlistment was, the draft law was for 12 months. And I looked it over, and you could enlist for foreign service. At that time, we had soldiers in Panama, Hawaii, and the Philippines. And I looked at them, and I knew Panama was hot. Panama Canal zone's close to the equator. Philippines was a long way away, and Hawaii looked like a nice place for a vacation. So I did 3 years, with 2 years in foreign service. That's the way it read. And I went enlisted, and I was sworn in the Army in Montgomery, Alabama, post office building in Montgomery, Alabama. And there I trained to Newport News, Virginia. and aboard ship. Excuse me. From Newport News, Virginia, through the Panama Canal, up to San Francisco, picked up more troops, and from there to Hawaii. Now, I picked Hawaii as a foreign service. I knew the Philippines was a long way away. Panama was hot near the equator. Hawaii looked like a good choice. So I enlisted in field artillery. I had just enough sense to know I didn't want in the infantry. But artillery is just about nearly as bad. Because somebody got to be up there on the front to tell the artillery where to shoot. And that's where I wound up. But anyway, we went to Hawaii, and Hawaii, I think it was fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. We had, every Wednesday afternoon was a half holiday. No duty on Saturday and Sunday. Had free buses, free trucks to carry us to the beach on Wednesday afternoon. And on Saturday and Sunday, we stayed at the beach, on the beach. Whenever we were off duty, most of us were on the beach. And Hawaii has some beautiful beaches, some great sandy beaches. And you've all heard of Waikiki Beach. Of course, that's the beach, I guess. But we were living it up. We having a time of our lives. And the Japanese interrupted. They knew that they had, the first thing they did, Japan doesn't have an oil well in Japan. And they knew if they went to war, they were going to have a ready supply of oil, a continued supply. And they ran down to the Netherlands, East Indies. And the first oil well in the world was drilled in the Netherlands, East Indies. That's Dutch Netherlands, East Indies. Now, when I was a boy, wagons was what we a wooden wheel wagon, the wheels about shoulder high, and the way they had a terrible heavy grease they put on that axle. And if it got dry, it went to squeaking, and it said the wheel was cussing the driver if he didn't grease his axle. But anyway, today, everything is we have a fitting, we call it a zerk fitting, you know what they are. A little fitting with a grease gun fits on it where the grease won't go anywhere, but in that little wherever you put that zerk fitting.